who are, well, first of all, welcome for those who the class, just a couple things. The survey for today's presenter is now open, so feel free to fill that out once the presentation is. Sorry, what was that? Okay, yeah, if anybody who's late who has not been that has not signed in with Professor Davidson over there, come see him after. Okay, yeah. Well, welcome to Convocations. Everybody who's visiting, everybody who's in class. Today we're in for a treat. We have tisqe't İlp'ilp, or also known as Harry Slickpoo Jr., who's an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe. He attended Northwest Indian College, the Nez Perce site from 2010 to 2012, where he learned the building blocks of the Nez Perce language and applied them in speech and conversation. Currently, Slickpoo Jr. teaches multiple language revitalization classes and that focus on reclamation, revitalization, and the importance of Nez Perce language and culture. He has become an elder instructor at Northwest Indian College, where he helps other students and the community members learn the language through epistemologies, ontologies, and traditional ways of storytelling. Slickpoo Jr. embodies his work through the Nez Perce way of thinking and being. He has a wealth of knowledge and is willing to invest this back into the community and more specifically to the youth. So overall, he really tries to connect and help students understand the connection between Native peoples, culture, land, and themselves. Today, his presentation is called nimiipuutimt, the people's language. So let's welcome Harry Slickpoo Jr. to Convocation.
I'm going to begin here today by first of all by welcoming each one of you here and introducing myself in my own language. And I thank Dr. Eric Freeman for inviting me here to be a part of this day with you and this Convocation Arts and Lecture Series here at Snow College. Ilechni Katsiaria Wako In Wenekisa tisqe't İlp'ilp Titoka Timki Ka in Zikza Tats Mewi Oikalo Ka Tats Atpapain Kinataks Ki Hitamen Waspa In Wenekisa tisqe't İlp'ilp Titoka Timki Ka Soyapo Timki Wenekin was Harry Slickpoo Jr. Inem was pila eptit in me with ka nimiipuutmt. Inem enactnic was lamtama ka in piimnia kamyachpa. Kona nimiipuutmt minin wataspa. Ka wako tau yasa pamapo ko nimiipuutmt wataspa. Natoti waka tisqe't İlp'ilp ka nakletsi waka wayuchtimini. Ka ipnimpist hiwaka watyatmas tamalichin ma. Na itzi was chichilla ka pi he was kalapoya potetokan chakchansi kine. Putimp wach mitat in wima in sapahitamata tu nimiipuutimt. Ka pilipt in wima kona Northwest Indian College ba. Lapit in me with İlp'ilp sa Slickpoo Kona Hitamanwas Research Library at the Nez Perce Tribe. Kahanak at taklay İlp'ilp sa pahitamatu nimiipuutimt Lewiston High School. Sich napatu sa kimilat stikin kinatakt. Hanaka ka ziyaw ya oikalo. At kapapain. Inem timina was leloin. At ka at kapapain. Hanaka ka ziyaw ya Snow College. Asapnia. Kakina was in sich nut timnapkinech. Kala he was ikuin. Yochkalo. So this is a traditional greeting and introduction in my culture. I come from the Plateau culture, Columbia Plateau, which is north of where we are. I grew up on the reservation in Kamiah, Idaho, where I was fortunate enough to grow up in a multi-generation home where my parents, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, everybody spoke the language. And I picked up on small pieces here and there. And like it said in the introduction, when I went back to college, is where I really learned to put all of the pieces of the language together to create conversation. So in introducing myself in this way, I recognize my ancestors and my relatives who came before me. I come from the Whitebird Band of Nez Perce people. I'm an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe. My father was the late Slickpoo Jr, and my grandfather was Alan Slickpoo Sr, and his father was Samuel Slickpoo. My mother's name is Sandra Slickpoo, and she's an enrolled member of the California Indian tribes at Chukchansi. So again, I just wanted to welcome each one of you and thank you for being here to hear these few words that I have to share with you today. I'm here to talk a little bit about these items that you see here. These items, at one time, were called the Spalding Allen Collection. In 2021, in an effort to decolonize our museum collection, the Nez Perce Tribe held a renaming ceremony. At this renaming ceremony, every one of these items were given their traditional Nez Perce name, as well as the collection as a whole was renamed İlp'ilp. So a little bit of history behind İlp'ilp. These items were first collected in the 1830s and 1840s by Reverend Henry Spalding. Henry Spalding and his wife Eliza were Presbyterian missionaries to my people during this time. Henry Spalding told his early Christian converts that these things were bad, that they just need to be thrown away. But he didn't throw them away. He collected them for himself. And he shoved everything into huge wooden barrels. And he had them shipped first to the state of what we call Hawaii today, around South America, up the East Coast to the Boston Harbor. From Boston, they were taken by wagon to Ohio State, where they sat in the basement of a college for many years. In the 1960s, the Nez Perce Tribe and the National Park Service opened up the Nez Perce National Historical Park at Spalding, Idaho. The Ohio State Historic Society said, hey, Nez Perce Tribe, we have some items in our collection that might interest you. We can loan them to you if you'd like to display them in your new museum. So the Nez Perce Tribe accepted, said, yeah, sure, we'll take those. And so they sat on display for about 30 years at the museum. In 1996, the Ohio State Historic Society said, "Hey, Nez Perce Tribe, we're recalling all of our loaned objects. We would like your collection back." The Nez Perce Tribe said, "No way. These items are from Nez Perce material culture. These items are at home with their people, where they belong. They have no connection to Ohio whatsoever." So the Ohio State Historic Society said, "Okay, well, if you want to keep them, it's going to cost you $608,000. $608,000 was the price that they put on 22 items. Within a matter of 6 weeks, the Nez Perce Tribe did some aggressive fundraising. They held penny drives at local schools. They even reached out to a couple of celebrities who we thought might contribute to our cause. And the day before the deadline, the Nez Perce Tribe presented a check for $608,000 and purchased these items. So I told you about the renaming ceremony. At that renaming ceremony, there was a board member from the Ohio History Connection, what they're called today. And that board member was in the audience. And the cultural resource director for the Nez Perce Tribe, he was up there talking about the importance of these items, where they come from, what they're made out of, what they represent to the people. Well, he also made a joke. He said, "You know, the Nez Perce Tribe does accept refund checks." That board member went back to Ohio that week, held a special executive session where they did approve the refund of $608,000 to the Nez Perce Tribe. And that was presented to the Nez Perce Tribe in 2022. So with these funds, they now sit in a scholarship account for students like you who want to go into museum curation, object management, collection care, inventory, or for artists, tribal artists, Nez Perce people who want to continue on, carry on this material culture and teach other people how to make these baskets, how to make these dresses, how to make moccasins. So that scholarship account is going towards education. So now my involvement in this collections story, last year I was fortunate enough to work with these items. I worked with Washington State University, the National Park Service at Washington, D.C., and the Nez Perce National Historic Park at Spalding. And I developed a QR code project. If anybody wants to learn more about the story of this collection, there's a book by Trevor Bond called "Coming Home to Nez Perce Country." And there's an Idaho Magazine article. Some of you might have picked that up on your way in, but it talks about a little bit about the history of this collection, and more importantly, the refund that the Nez Perce Tribe was given just a couple of years ago. So my supervisor, Ann McCormick, at the Nez Perce Tribe came to me and she said, "You know, Harry, because of my work as the collection specialist for Hitaminwas Research Library, under the IMLS grant that we were working on, I had to come up with a personal project. And my supervisor, she told me, okay, I want you to go home and think about this over the weekend and come back to me with your project proposal. So I thought about it. I came back Monday morning and I said, you know what, Ann, I'm not a weaver. I don't make baskets. I don't make buckskin or hides. I don't work with buckskin, so I can't make a dress or a man's shirt here. And I don't do beadwork. So what I do is I speak the language. And so I had an idea. I said, let's take some QR codes for these objects in the museum, put them right next to the items so people, visitors, and guests who come to the museum are able to scan that code on their phone or tablet, and then we'll take them to a link to teach them how to say that word. If you don't understand the phonetics or the lexicography of the language, it's hard for people who are not Nez Perce to connect to the culture. To be honest, it's also hard for our own tribal members. Nez Perce people are losing their language at a very fast rate. In fact, Nez Perce language is classified as critically endangered. We have, on one hand, elders who are considered fluent, and that's in 3 states, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Is there anybody here who can pronounce this word? Try a little easier one. How about this one? nimiipuutimt. Anyone? Thank you. Thank you for trying. You're close. The letter C in Nez Perce makes a TS sound. So like the ending of bats, cats, hats. So it says Leets cow. Everyone repeat after me. Leets cow. Leets cow. Țaudiwantin ʻilp'ilp. Uyatats. You guys sound really good. Țaudiwantin ʻilp'ilp. So you see the X with a dot underneath it. That's making the sound. We don't make that sound in modern English. I did have a linguist in one of my presentations this summer at Yellowstone National Park, and he said 500 years ago or so, maybe longer, English did have that sound. So my QR code project is not only giving back to the community, teaching tribal members their own language, but it's also engaging our visitors and our guests to be able to connect to the material culture. Okay, so this here is the Nez Perce National Historic Park website where my project is stored digitally. So I wanted to be able to show you a couple of examples here of the work that I did. So these are the 23 objects collection. Click on the image. It'll go to its own personal page where it has its item description name, the history of it, and how it's stored in section. We also have audio. Test that part. Okay. So anyways, it's saying İmaspalch. İmaspalch. So that's a bag that the women would make out of Indian hemp or dogbane. So dogbane, is there anybody here who's ever heard of Indian hemp? 1, 2, 3, okay. So this plant was very important to our people and many other indigenous groups. And for the purposes of making ropes or cordage, or you can make textiles. So like this women's hat is made out of hemp and bear grass. The reason why we made our bags, these would store foods, fruits, meat, berries, and they would be stored in a cache pit to access throughout the winter when we don't have any foods out on the land. But dogbane, or Indian hemp, if eaten, is very toxic, has a natural pesticide. That's why agriculture doesn't like it. Their cattle eat it, and it gets their horse and cows sick, goats, whatever. So they've done their best in my area to eradicate this plant. But traditionally, the people would store their food in there because if the bugs would try to eat through the bag, it would kill them. What we call an old Indian trick. If I can get back to okay. So if anybody, you can scan this QR code here. That'll take you directly to the link for my QR code project, and you can hear how every one of these items is pronounced in my language. So I wanted to move in next to talk a little bit more about the work that I do as the collection specialist for the Nez Perce Tribe. As you can see here in this picture, I'm doing some outreach work to let people know that we exist. The Nez Perce Tribe did not have a library since the 1980s. And so I'm doing my best to build up our collection of books, materials, and resources for students like you to come and be able to access and work on whatever papers or research projects you have going on. Also, this year, so my QR code project was last year. This year, I'm working on a new project, and I'm working with Archie Finney, who was a Nez Perce anthropologist. So this is right up the anthropology's class alley here. This is Archie Finney. He studied under Franz Boas and graduated from Columbia University and went on to study in Germany. Archie Finney worked very closely with Franz Boas, and he recorded his mother telling Nez Perce legends. And he wrote this book called the Nez Perce Text. Archie Finney's mother knew zero English. So the recordings that we have of her, he transcribed them and put them in a book. So her versions of the stories are not diluted, they're not modified, they're told exactly the way they were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years So my project that I'm working on is I'm updating his text. He uses a particular kind of writing style that we don't use today. This book was published in 1938, so it's almost 100 years old, and it needs updated. So just this week, on Tuesday, I met with the Nez Perce Tribe Circle of Elders, and I presented my first story, which was like 10 pages long, but I updated it to the tribe's current spelling system. So that's a project I'm working on currently. Also, I am on the advisory committee for Kaya. Is there anybody here who's heard of Kaya? How about the American Girl collection? American Girl? Kaya was the American Girl collection here. She represents the Nez Perce people from the 1700s. Her full name is İ'ilp'ilp. İ'ilp'ilp. And what we're doing with this project is we're going through and we're updating the Kaya books. I think there's like 7 or 8 books in her series, but they all need updated from their spelling, word use, and making sure the stories are historically accurate and they still represent the Nez Perce people in a good way today. So this is just something short that I want to go through with each one of you here, and we're going to go through and we're going to talk about, or we're going to say these words, including her clothing and her food. So if everybody will repeat after me, İ'ilp'ilp, İ'ilp'ilp, wapsus, wapsus, her braids, wapsus, ǩalaunin, ǩalaunin. So that's her beadwork that's right here. You can also say this for like this dress here, ǩalaunin. That means it's with beads, or it's beaded, it has beadwork. İ'ilp'ilp, İ'ilp'ilp. See that in this word here, İ'ilp'ilp. That's the buckskin that her dress is made out of. tisqeʻe, tisqeʻe. tisqeʻe, tisqeʻe. Țămătwis, țămătwis. İ'ilp'ilp, İ'ilp'ilp. Walim lapqet, walim lapqet. Hipinwas, hipinwas. Țăptăclaica'i, țăptăclaica'i. Țămit, țămit. Națoch, națoch. Apa, apa. Imsa, imsa. Ketmes, ketmes. Don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz at the end of the presentation, okay? You guys sound really good. Just want to let you know that you sound good. So, last year, in my introduction, you noticed I began working as the Nez Perce language teacher at Lewiston High School. And this is significant for me because the Lewiston High School is off of the reservation. It's in what we call more of an urbanized or city environment. So I'm able to reach students who would otherwise not be exposed to their own Nez Perce language, their Nez Perce history, and their Nez Perce culture, like as if they were going to school on the reservation, where they have the language program, they have after-school program, they have summer program, where people come in and teach the students about their history, language, and culture. So it's a good opportunity for the urban Indian to be able to connect to their culture. And so I received support from the Nez Perce Circle of Elders, who we consider back home to be like the ultimate authority on cultural concerns or aspects in life. Also the language, if anybody has a question about the language, those elders are the people who we can go to confirm this is the way it is, this is the way it's said. So here I am, I'm pictured with the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee, or what we call NEPDIC. NEPDIC here, we have the governing body. Every year, 3 new members are voted. The incumbents can keep their seat, but they have 3 of them every year for election. So they have 3-year seats for each one. I got, in the state of Idaho, if you're qualified by your own tribe, that gives you the authority to go in to a public school system and teach without a teacher's certification. So it's basically saying that your own people support you, acknowledge you, and qualify you as a teacher with the support of the elders and the tribal government. Then that gives me the ability to go in and receive my Idaho Educator certification without going through the traditional 4-year school program. So these are my Lewiston high school students, and I was able to take them on a field trip with Nez Perce Tourism. We went up Hell's Canyon, which is the deepest gorge in North America, deeper than Grand Canyon, and our people have lived here for thousands of years. And here at this place is called Buffalo Eddy. Buffalo Eddy, we have pictographs and petroglyphs. My students were able to observe those, learn about them. And this is our tribal elder, who's also the author of Lewis and Clark Among the Nez Perce, which tells the Nez Perce side of history. We hear all the time the popular Lewis and Clark journals, from Lewis and Clark's perspective, from the Americanist history, but rarely do you ever hear the tribal people telling their own story. And so this man here did his best to write our version of Lewis and Clark. One example, and then I'll open it up for questions. Historically, when we're introducing ourselves to a new people, a new group of people, if we didn't understand each other's language, we had sign language. So when the first French fur trappers and people came into our area, they did the hand signals for who are you, their introductions. The Nez Perce people had a sign specifically that meant țilp'ilp. Can you repeat that after me? țilp'ilp. So this sign goes like this: up in a pointed motion, then across the face. țilp'ilp. That was our sign indicating who we were. And that sign means we are the people that travel over the mountains and onto Buffalo Country, Montana, Wyoming. So țilp'ilp were the walking people. That was before the advent of the horse in the 1700s. So țilp'ilp. And when the French fur trappers saw that, they said, oh, they pierced their nose. Look, they pierced their nose. But we never did historically, as a people, pierce our nose. So again, Lewis and Clark, they came to our people and entered our history in 1805, 1806. In the Lewis and Clark journals, they talk about observing Nez Perce people in the village where I grew up in Kamiai that had dentalia shells through their nose. Dentalia shells are like this. From this woman's dress, these long white shells here, that's dentalia. And those shells come from the coast. But the way that my grandpa explained it to us when we were growing up was because where we are in Idaho, we're located halfway between the Pacific coast, halfway between the Great Plains in Montana. So there was a major trade route through our country, and people would be coming and going with our permission through our territory. And the people that Lewis and Clark wrote about were actually visitors from the Pacific coast, where they do, in fact, pierce their nose. So those people that Lewis and Clark wrote about were not Nez Perce. They were only guests in the country. Wati tu sapnit wasi. Hanaka in sich ne patsu sa ilachni ka țiyauia tim napkinich. Țiyauia, thank you. Are there any questions at this time?
Yeah, we'll have the TAs will have microphones here for those that have questions, and it looked like we had a couple already.
Do you know anyone who knows how to make like the dresses and the shoes?
Do I know anybody that knows how to make the dresses? Yes, I do. So thank you for your question. Just like when I was thinking about my project, the QR codes, and the way that I said that what I do is language, not everybody in my community is a language person. Fortunately, they're just not interested in language. But again, going back to our horse culture, not everybody's a horseman. Not everybody's a weaver, but there are still people who are horsemen. There are still people who weave. There are still people who do beadwork and make dresses or work with buckskin. There are still religious leaders who carry on our traditional practices outside of the Christianity and what has been introduced to us. There are people who still practice both their old traditional ways of living and modern day living. So the answer to that is yes, there are still people who make our traditional material culture. Thank you.
What would you say is like one thing we can do for sure to like help the projects and to help your culture and that kind of stuff? And like take away from this?
Question. So what would I say how you can help? I would just say learn about it. Learn and share. You know, that old saying, if you want to keep it, you share it. So if we want to keep these things alive, we have to share it with others. We can't be greedy and keep it for ourselves. We can't keep the knowledge and hoard the knowledge and be the gatekeepers. Because if we do that, we're taking it to the ground with you. So that's what I'm here with you, each one of you today, is I'm trying to share and give you a new perspective, help you to look through Nez Perce eyes, help you to understand the world from a Nez Perce point of view. And so the more that you know, the more that you're aware, the more that you can be a good ally, be somebody who's supportive, and try to break down stereotypes about tribal people.
I know that a lot of Native American people resonate with the spirit animals and spirit guides. Is that something that is significant within your tribe and your culture, or is that just kind of a distant thing?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So, the answer to that is yes. In my culture, or in Nez Perce, we call it Wayakin. Wayakin, something that was very special and a very important part of our life at one time. Our Wayakin could be anything. It could be that could come to visit you. It could be a bird that came from the air. It could be a weather pattern, like a thunderstorm coming your way. So it could be a variety of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be like an animal. But traditionally, young boys around the age of 7, 8, 9, or 10, like pre-adolescent, would be trained by the men in the community on how to behave, following proper protocol, what to expect, and how to carry yourself. Because that little child, that young boy, would go out into the mountains alone in seclusion on their guardian quest, is what we call their guiding spirit. And the same thing for the girls. The women of the community would prepare that young girl on what to expect, how to behave, and there were certain protocols like fasting. You didn't eat or drink while you're out there. There was a ceremonial sweat to cleanse yourself in a sweat house, and all in preparation for trying to get your Wayakin. And so that animal would come to you and it would sing you a song, and it would tell you, this song is going to help you through life. It's going to help you to be successful. If there's any time that you're in need, any time that you come through hard times, you rely on this song and its power, and you'll be all right. You'll come out to the other side successful, healthy. So there are stories of people using their Wayakin powers during the Nez Perce War of 1877 to help flee from the U.S. cavalry in different ways. But those are all, I guess, some people it's kind of culturally sensitive. People don't really talk openly about things like that because it's supposed to be. But thank you for your question.
So I know you mentioned that you and your culture have some traditions. How similar are your traditions towards other native tribes, and their traditions? Because I know a little bit about the Navajo tribe, and I was just wondering if there were any similarities between that tribe, your tribe, your culture.
Thank you for your question. So, of course, all throughout the Americas, there's hundreds of different cultures, and even hundreds, maybe even thousands or more different dialects of languages spoken. But the group of people who I'm related to would be considered Plateau, Columbia Plateau. So the Columbia Plateau people would be like the Nez Perce, which is what I am, the Walla Walla, the Cayuse, the Umatilla, the Yakima, the Warm Springs. So all throughout Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, along the Columbia River, the Snake River. Those are all cultures that are related to one another. We have similar dialects, similar lifestyles, and similar religious beliefs. People who live north of us are all related to each other. We're not related linguistically or culturally. They're what we call interior Salish. So the interior Salish are going to be like the Flathead, the Kootenai, the Spokane, the Coeur d'Alene, the Natchez, Colville. All of those people are related. Then the further south, southern Idaho, you get into what's called Great Basin. So we have like the Shoshone, the Paiute, Ute, other, or go farther south, Navajo. We're not related to any of those. The people who we're related to, mostly in the Pacific. Thank you for your question.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, and after this, well, actually, why don't we do this? It's 1:20 right now. For those who do have a class, it's okay if you leave, but we might, since we have a few more people that have their hands raised, maybe we'll keep asking questions, but I'll give time for anybody who wants to, who has to get up and go is fine, and those who want to stay can stay. So maybe just take a minute break here because we do have multiple hands raised.
Thank you.
All right. So maybe we could start with one of the questions that of those who did have their hands raised. Maya, are you right down here? Okay, yeah.
First, I want to say thanks. Thank you for walking in a good way and sharing your knowledge and wisdom and understanding. I actually, with listening to you talk about your history with your language, you said that it wasn't until college, even though you grew up in a multi-generational home, that you put your own language together, right? So I was wondering, in your family, in the story of your family, do you know, like, who was the last person who actually spoke your language fluently, and what was the story there with that? Because I've talked to my students about